In 2018, ransomware advanced significantly and is now capable of taking out infrastructure and operations across the globe. As a result, many organizations are bogged down in reactive work and often overlook the value of crucial information. In Domain Tools' Threat Intelligence Report, learn how to uncover some of the most critical insights from your organization's alerts and indicators that will allow you to shift to a more proactive posture. To download this white paper, please visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/securityweekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Little inside baseball. Doug was joking in the previous segment how I'm always talking about code and unit testing and all that stuff. One of the reasons why I want to push the next release of our code, and everyone's like, What is your code? What are you talking about? It's a security problem. I'm like, no, it's the code that lets us push content for all of our shows, which is great that I get to be involved with that and use it as examples for security. But functionality-wise, the reason why we're encouraging people to go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, tell us about your interest, join the list so you can tell us about your interest, is all the software is going to be interconnected. So as we publish shows, they'll be tagged with certain types of content. If you're interested in that, it's going to send you a notification. So the reason why I've been so hot and heavy on getting our application and doing coding, one reason is, other than I'm having a lot of fun, the other reason is there's actually business requirements that we do this. And one of the new features is so that our listeners can subscribe to a site, say, I want to know about application security, I want to know about attack simulation, whatever it is. And every time we publish content that's in that particular category, if you will, we'll send you a notification.
And you need an everything button.
Or if you want, if you want to get notified about everything, you don't really need to create an account. Like, just go subscribe to all of our shows.
I know. Well, right? Yeah. So subscribe to all the shows.
But that's what's happening. People are getting overwhelmed doing that, and then.
But some of us are, keep getting asked, like, all this stuff, right? It's like, oh my
God. The other project that I'm pushing to take some time out to be able to do is I want to have transcriptions of every show.
Ooh.
And so I've been looking at some technology to do that. Most of the technology out there requires that you go to a third-party service like Google or IBM or one of these other services that will transcribe your audio file. And there's tons of transcription services. For the amount of content we produced, that cost is pretty high. Yeah. We're talking like hundreds of dollars a week, which starts to add up over time. So I kind of want to do that on our own. So we'll see where that takes us. I think that'd be also a really fun little engineering project to take on. And we'll see. My guess is there's a Python library. I don't remember the name. But it doesn't require that you subscribe to a third-party service. You can do it locally. I wonder what the differences are between the accuracy.
I don't know, but we can have some fun coming up with words that it can't translate. Or it translates into other meanings.
There are some that you can train.
Rural juror.
There was one where you could give it training files. Like this is what the language normally looks. It's basically machine learning at that point.
Needs to know what Paul's voice sounds like.
Yeah, and how I articulate. That's a perfect use case for some kind of. That's what I was thinking. My other thing was, could we write code so that when you search the transcripts, that there was a blood alcohol level that was associated with that based on the way
That's the weighting. That's the weighting. So you keep sliding the scale. So by final,
So based on the way that I speak, it would interpret that speech and make a determination as to my blood alcohol level.
Exactly.
So that when you found certain pieces of content, you would know how much.
So something like "You kids get off my lawn" comes out as unit testing is very important.
No, it's not transcribed. It's a level. It's
a level. It's a sliding scale.
You might want to keep that derived blood alcohol content strictly need to know.
That's right. That's right.
I think you should put it on the screen. It's because the blood alcohol content's rising.
Yeah, like as you're watching the
episode. I know. There's like a meter on the side. Like
right.
Try to push Paul over the top tonight.
Security Weekly will also be at Hacker Halted in Atlanta, Georgia, October 10th through the 11th. EC Council has a 15% off discount for their bootcamp courses or workshops. You can go to securityweekly.com/Hacker Halted to get that and sign up today. Make sure you do that. We're going to have a fun time. I'm going to have a fun time with Jeff and all of the Security Weekly crew that's going to Hacker Halted. We're going to be at that super awesome cigar lounge in Atlanta. Looking forward to it, Jeff.
Me too.
And you'll also be at Black Hat. We get to have a cigar and a drink at Black Hat, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good.
And DEF CON.
I miss my Jeff time. Jeff, we haven't had a cigar and a drink together in person in a while.
I'll be in studio next week.
Oh,
perfect. The last cigar I had with Jeff that was not here was in a 3-sided structure in South Dakota at like 20 below zero.
I saw those pictures.
That was cool.
That
was actually cool, Jeff. I enjoyed that a lot, but it was actually a 3-sided structure outdoors in South Dakota in the winter. So
it was even better when we found the cigar shop down in town.
Well, that's true. Then we got to sit on a couch instead of freezing our.
Yep.
Anyway, we've got stories to talk about. We might as well get ready because we were talking about this at the break. There was a senator, congressman, someone who was supposed to speak at Black Hat.
Congressman Hurd, yeah.
Congressman Hurd. I really I liked Jennifer Granick's comments on this because I think they were unbiased and based on the facts, and I like that she pointed those things out so that I don't necessarily have to like share my own views and have those misinterpreted, right? Because I really like the way she analyzed the situation. She's also not only a fabulous person, but also an extremely intelligent attorney on matters such like this. And so basically there was Congressman Hurd, who was scheduled to speak at Black Hat. Keynote Black Hat because of his knowledge, apparently, of cybersecurity. However, when they looked at his record for voting on bills, I think it was solely based on this record.
It was based on that.
He voted against several bills dealing with abortion and women's rights,
STEM.
STEM. There was a bill for STEM and enrichment for women, and he voted against that. That's the one that I really like. Political issues aside, you got to promote STEM for everyone in the U.S.
Yes.
That's the only way we're going to get people to work in fields like cybersecurity to help us make the world a better place, to help be developers and fill all these positions in the companies that we want to create in the U.S., right? That's near and dear to my heart. I've done a startup. I created Security Weekly. I want to see people that have engineering and are passionate about engineering.
Why would you not promote that?
Why would you not promote that? And also, there was a lot of, you can go view, because it's public record, the details of all the bills that dealt with women's rights and also a women's rights issue of abortion. Now, what Jennifer Granick pointed out, she is legal counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union, asked what other views would disqualify someone from speaking at the conference. In a tweet, she asked, should Black Hat now ask potential speakers for their views on abortion, or is it fine so long as we don't know? That is such a loaded statement that afforded me the opportunity to consider what happened in various lights with an unbiased opinion, right? Or an unbiased kind of questions, right? So what I gleaned from that is asking is, are the political views criteria for being accepted to speak at a conference or not? The other question that it brought up was, in this case, it's not only that person's views, but a documented track record of voting against women's rights. Therefore, justifiable to be asked not to speak at a conference or not? Because that is a slightly different situation in my mind. It's not you're an individual. You have influence over what bills are passed in the United States. That to me was kind of an interesting issue and question to pose. And is Jennifer's questioning the access to information. So as long as we don't share or publicize our views, then it's okay to speak regardless of what your unpublicized views are. Because that doesn't seem...
If you politicize it, it becomes a weapon. So it's like the same thing as a company. Mm-hmm. So if you take a company, I'm going to just call it Company X because I'm going to stay off the political football.
Yep.
Company X is sitting out there and they say, I sell wine. Mm-hmm. I don't care. I'll buy wine. I like to buy wine. I like to buy bourbon. I like to buy all these things. I don't care. But the minute you take your company and you say, you know, Doug, I actually am going to be a whatever company. I'm not going to go anywhere with this politically.
Yeah. So let me try and phrase this for you, Doug. We sell wine, but we do not like XYZ.
Exactly.
And if you like XYZ, we don't want you to buy our wine.
We don't want your business. Yeah. All of a sudden, that's politicized. It's not wine sales anymore. That is now a whole political animal, and I'm going to make a decision about it. Left, right, doesn't matter. I'm going to make a decision about it based on the politicization of it, and then it becomes an issue. If it's just...
This comes right back to drawing a penis. Google's...
okay, I'm out. Yeah, those is...
No, it does.
No, I know.
So Google built an AI penis detector.
They did.
Does this mean we're moving on?
No, sorry, Jeff. But
it means Paul's about to whip it out.
Time out. Let's go back to Congressman Hurd, accepted to speak, and now not speaking at Black Hat. Jeff.
Well, okay, so we were moving on. So just a couple thoughts, and I don't know all the details, and I'm actually struggling. Do we actually have an article in our notes? Because I'm not seeing it if we do.
There are articles in there.
Article 8 under Paul's stories.
And just for context for our listeners, it does link to an article, I want to say it's from TechCrunch, could be someone else that broke the story, Jeff, that also links to Black Hat's official statement on the issue.
Okay, I was searching for Black Hat, but I spelled it as one word, so I wasn't seeing it. My bad. I'm an old timer.
No worries.
Not knowing all the details, I actually, because I'm on the media list, as I'm sure you are too, Paul. You probably got the same email saying, "Hey, we're excited to announce this guy, Congressman Hurd, is going to be keynoting. Let us know if you want to speak to him." I'm like, yeah, I'd speak to him. And then, a minute later, I get an email saying, "Oh, never mind. We changed our mind. We had to pull them." And then I've been busy, so I haven't really looked up all the details. But just based on your description, I think the first question philosophically that we should be asking ourselves as a community is why is Black Hat or any security hacker or cyber conference inviting a politician in the first place? Is that a prudent thing to do? And to answer that question in part, I would say, well, as much as we bitch and complain about, government overreach and we have all sorts of conspiracy theories, the irony is so many aspects of our industry, when we look at what's actually going to make a difference, what's actually going to change things, more times than not, people are concluding there needs to be regulation that comes from the government. So I think the question is fair to say, how do we involve politicians and our elected officials into the conversation? So,
Jeff, I would like to comment on that and just say that I think whoever we or a conference, right, collectively that probably has an advisory board, we've probably all been on advisory boards for conferences, right? We select speakers based on the information that they want to share with the community and the value of that information to the community. I don't believe that it should be based on really anything other than their contribution to the community if that's valid, whether you agree with it or not. I think individuals, whether they are convicted criminals, whether they are people who are in politics, whether they are from whatever race, creed, religion, the criteria should be, what do they have to share with the security community? We can all judge people based on their political affiliation or whatever. I don't think that's right personally. I think that you may not agree with, for example, Edward Snowden, with what he did, right? And that's your right. You can voice your opinion about what he did or didn't do or whatever. But if Edward Snowden were to give a speech, I would want to hear what he had to say, because there might be some interesting things that I could glean that could potentially benefit the community, certainly.
But to the point, Paul, you would, but what if somebody is out there that, is diametrically opposed to Snowden as people are to, the issues that have been raised in terms of...
And I totally get the other side of that.
And,
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I do, because if you're diametrically opposed to what that person believes in, the fact that they're speaking at a conference could promote what they believe in, and you're not behind. If you have someone who's a murderer come on the conference and talk, are you this is the tricky issue. Are you promoting murdering people, even though they may have some valid things to share? And I'll give you an example of this. My brother-in-law takes his high school class to the prison here in Rhode Island, and they sit and talk with someone who is a convicted murderer, right? You don't agree with what that person has done. However, it provides a valuable lesson to the students in, number one, wow, they come out of that going, he was a really nice person. I want to write him a letter. My brother's like, oh, no. You're not writing him a letter. You got to understand that bad people can lie and deceive you and seem like nice people. Secondly, you don't want to commit any horrible crimes. This person is in jail for the rest of his life. So there are valuable things that can come from listening to people speak that have done things that you don't necessarily agree with. However, I agree that some people may come down to my brother-in-law and go, look, why are you taking kids to prison talking to a murderer? What if that is promoting the fact that, prisoners can now speak to children and glorifying maybe what they've done? I totally get. But
let me put on my Spock hat for a minute. So I'm going to put on my Spock hat. I'm going to take all the politics off this. I'm going to take all my personal feelings off this. Here's what I'm going to say about this. I don't know what they were thinking when they invited somebody who was a political lightning rod to speak at a non-political issue.
I agree, Doug. It's really just if you're going to promote a speaker, you got to do the background check and realize that there might be repercussions and maybe choose someone else.
And I think the decision to withdraw this person started to become about not necessarily some kind of politicizing issue as much as it was about, Black Hat is about getting people to come to the conference. There are people who would not come to this conference because of this person's political point of view, regardless of what he's speaking about. Right. There's people going to say, and it's going to turn into a political firestorm. The minute this guy's there, you're going to have people protesting out front. You're going to have people protesting for him, against it.
But not just that. If it alienates a subsection of the community,
so what's the point? I can
totally see that point.
To me, it's like bring Langevin and McCall. So Langevin and McCall are the two co-chairs. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat of this Congressional Cyber Caucus.
If you want to be fair, let them co-present together on stage.
So you bring Langevin and McCall, the two co-chairs of the Cyber Caucus. This guy's not even a member of the Cyber Caucus. Bring the two co-chairs of the Congressional Cyber Caucus and let them be the co-presenters. You got a Republican, you got a Democrat. You take the politics off the table, and you say, let's talk about the issues that affect Black Hat.
And you and I and many others in Rhode Island, regardless of our political affiliations, have to admire Langevin for what he's done.
Yes,
for the cybersecurity and for the state.
I mean, you just strip away all the other stuff.
I was gonna ask you guys, beyond your guy Langevin, is there anybody else that's really qualified? To come in any capacity to speak.
Well, bring McCall. I mean, I don't agree with McCall's politics personally, but when you put the two of them on the same stage,
it's balances.
It's balanced out.
It's like our political system.
You know what? These two, and I've seen these people speak. I've read the stuff they're doing on the Cyber Caucus. Go read that and go, this is not a political, religious, political, whatever issue. It's just about cyber.
Yeah.
And get them to talk about cyber, and don't go invite some lightning rod, left or right. It doesn't matter. Pick one. I don't care. Bring the two people together and put them on the stage, and I guarantee you they'll talk about cyber. And those two guys could sit up there to talk about. I've met with both.
Yeah, I agree.
I've met with most. I have met with both their delegations in person in Washington, and I'm telling you right now, I can sit there and I can talk to McCall's delegation about cyber, and we're not talking about
they don't drag
left issues. We were talking about cyber issues, and it was the same issue. It was the same issue I talked about Langevin office with. So listen. You got to think about these things when you plan a conference, and if you go out there and you're going to hurt your conference, you're going to cause a firestorm, and you're going to have protesters in the street. I think that was just a mistake on somebody's part. And
so to summarize, I think what we're saying is good idea, not necessarily the right person.
Poor execution.
And I would even go so far to say is maybe the proper way to get involvement, if we agree, and I think we do, that there should be some sort of engagement with our elected officials to talk about things cybersecurity.
I think that's very important, and I think it was great, the idea that we start to get Washington involved in some of these things, because it's important that they are involved. But it was maybe not the right choice of person.
Yeah. Right, maybe not the right choice of person, and I like maybe putting the spin on it because they're not necessarily the most qualified to talk on the subject, with other political issues notwithstanding.
Well, and I think what I take issue with, Jeff, is not necessarily the overarching political issues that deal with abortion that people have very strong feelings about, and I totally get.
It had nothing to do with cyber,
but it has nothing to do with cyber, but. In cyber, we're all, at least on this show, right, very passionate about involving everyone in engineering and STEM. And the fact that to me was the thing that was kind of brushed under the rug, right, was no, this person voted against the bill.
That guy went after STEM. I mean, come on, listeners. I mean, that guy went after STEM.
Yeah.
It wasn't about abortion. Let's just take that off the table. I'm not talking about that.
Went after an issue that's very near and dear to cybersecurity in the issues that we're dealing with in cybersecurity. I'm
not talking about women's rights or religion or anything else.
Exactly.
It was STEM.
It was STEM.
Think about that.
There's another piece here. He voted against him. If he was being there to talk about why the hell he think in his involvement with cyber, voting against STEM was the right thing to do, that's a different conversation than trying to bring in the abortion and all the other stuff. I'm not saying it's right that he voted against STEM, but that's right in understanding somebody else's point of view that you may not agree with. I have trouble with coloring the other stuff for saying that's why they canceled him. They should have done a better job of screening and thinking about it.
I agree. They should have done a better. And again, it's a tough issue, right? I go back to Jennifer's comments about hold on, wait a minute. What's the criteria for speaking, right?
Yeah,
that's a very, very slippery slope, and I think it does transition into our next article of who has the say as to what content is shared publicly, right? And it can even go down to
First Amendment.
But
I know you want to move on to penises. Final thought, you're as passionate as you are about the STEM issue. It's objectively just another issue,
I agree, Jeff. Yeah, no, I agree.
And you're either we as a community are going to embrace our elected officials regardless of their views and regardless of the stances, whether we're passionate about it or not. I mean, necessarily I think we need to have some sort of disattachment. Is that a word? And I think maybe that's what Jennifer was suggesting.
But it's tough, Jeff. I mean, it's where do you say okay, we're going to bring Attila the Hun in to give us a few comments on cybersecurity? It's not a politicized issue, but it's like Attila the Hun. So,
but if he's the elected official,
well, yeah, if he's the guy making the decisions, but that guy Hurd was not even on the Cyber Caucus. He's not even a member of the committee.
You said that a couple times.
I know,
and
I'm ranting. You kids, get off my lawn.
I tried to suggest, Doug, that maybe we should focus on he wasn't necessarily the most qualified on the topic and get off the other.
No, I agree with
Jeff. Jeff has a valid point. Yep. You should be, in my mind, evaluated on your credentials and knowledge in the subject matter of the conference that your knowledge can benefit the community.
So to be
And final thought.
Go ahead.
I'll shut up after this. Final thought, maybe bringing a said elected official in as a keynote isn't the best way to engage. Maybe it's a roundtable discussion, a panel discussion, even a town hall type of format. I don't know if Black Hat or RSA has ever done something like that.
I think that's a great compromise, Jeff. My wife and I just celebrated our 13-year wedding anniversary. As you guys know, compromises are really important. Maybe it's a great compromise that there's a panel of folks that maybe have different views and opinions. In fact, we've had panel discussions here on Security Weekly where people have different views about security, right? And they all have something, whether you agree with it or not, that could benefit us as a security community. So maybe having it as a panel is
I think if you're going to get into politics, if you want to talk to a programmer about programming, cool. But if you want to get into politics, you should represent all the points of view, and that means it's going to have to be a panel because there's a lot of different points of view there.
Panel. Yeah.
I completely agree with that, and I think that the point for conference planners and other people is think carefully about who you're inviting.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, having done some conferences, sometimes it's like I called 17 people and this guy accepted, and we're going to get that person, but don't do that. Go, think carefully about who you're picking and say, what's the agenda here? Why was this guy even wanting to be there in the first place? Is it really because he cares about cyber, or is it because of something else? And so if it's going to be politicized, you're going to bring elected officials, bring something that brings both parties to the table. Don't just go out and pick somebody who's a lightning rod and throw them up there and hope that it goes okay, because you're going to be sorry. I don't care which side of that you're on. You can be on either side. It doesn't matter.
But now, and I am going to transition to the next story. That
I know you want to move on to penises. We can move on to penises.
It's not about penises. It's about moving on to the next story. That it relates, and it's not. It's about who controls the content, who controls which content. But this ties into the conversations we've had about if you're a payment processor and you have policies about what goods and or services that are legal that you can sell, right? And in this case, the latest thing is that in 2016, there was an AI experiment from Google that guessed what users were doodling. It was an AI Pictionary. Google built into that because obviously if you've ever been in the situation that I've been in, where you're here at the Security Weekly offices and you hang up a whiteboard and you put out all the markers and it's a clean whiteboard, in the next few minutes when you walk past that whiteboard, someone will draw a penis on it. It's just someone.
Yeah, it's like
Sometimes
possibly
it's me.
be called.
Sometimes it's me, right? You got to test the whiteboard and the markers, right?
That's right. And what better way to test it than by drawing a penis?
Google's the same thing. They basically put up a whiteboard for the internet, and what do people want to draw? They want to draw a penis, right? Like,
go figure.
If your 15-year-old nephew sees a car that's dirty, what are they going to write in the back windshield? Like, they're going to draw a penis.
I mean, it's like a human nature. It's like the genome or something. I don't know.
But Google specifically filtered out all of the penises.
Yeah, it was sad.
So put that specific content aside, I think it also ties into Jennifer's comments. Like, who gets to decide what's shared and what's not? Robert Graham had an article about the freedom of speech and how we use these examples and they're typically misinterpreted. Who gets to decide what information is shared? And I've said this before on the show, and it greatly concerns me that the large content providers such as Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter ultimately have a lot of power as to what can be shared. We saw this with, what was the thing that banned porn recently, and Pornhub was going to buy them. What was that?
I'm not up on my latest porn news.
Tumblr.
Tumblr, yeah.
Right? Tumblr was filled with adult material.
They decided to
Some of it was specifically pornography.
Tumblr no longer exists, by the way.
Some of it was, people were just sharing adult-themed posts. It was an expression, much like an artist would draw a picture of a naked person, right?
Or
And there was
straight up porn.
but everything in between, right?
Yeah, I mean everything in between
right, sure.
art and porn and cartoons. Yeah,
like straight up
porn. Yeah.
and straight up like artistic
straight up
expression,
porn, yeah.
right? And everything in between. And Tumblr made this decision that we're not going to allow adult content.
Yeah.
And like you said, Doug, like they,
Yep.
right? And as Pornhub really wants to buy it and bring it back, I think rightfully so, to give people that artistic expression. And there's lots of other sites that anyway.
So the tie-in here is sort of interesting, Paul, because you're trying to tie this into privacy issues, rights, censorship, which are necessarily regulatory legal issues under, we're in the U.S., so it's under the Constitution.
The First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
We've had various conversations in the past where people have expressed concerns about government overreach, and I have said on more than one occasion, why aren't we as concerned about the Googles and the Twitters and the Facebooks and the Apples as we are with the government, if not more so? So it's it's sort of coming to a head here.
Yeah,
I like what you did there, Jeff.
Yeah,
I didn't even make any silly puns about that. I told you it wasn't about the penis.
But I did.
But it's
not about the penis. That's the title for this episode.
Just the tip.
Not about the penis.
I knew
what's
a
interesting
strong
is
topic would come up.
But
these are hard issues, Jeff.
They are hard issues.
He's being slapped in the face with these issues.
And the First Amendment is so short, but it's printed on a very wide.
That's right.
It's a really long amendment.
But what's interesting, and I'll just throw this out, the First Amendment that we're citing has to do with government.
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
Intervening or
very much
infringing upon the rights of citizens. What, and I'm asking this because I really don't know, what in the Constitution at all protects any of us against industry and companies and organizations?
Yeah. My view on that is very little, if not nothing, which for me is extremely concerning, especially having run a podcast
let's
that's
run
on the
with
internet
that,
for 14 years. Again, I'll state it on the show. We're very lucky that Apple has been very much hands-off on podcasts, right? Is not limiting content, is not going to the extremes that we've seen other major providers do. And let's be frank, as podcasters, Apple is a very important platform that allows us to exist and monetize on the platform, sharing information for free and being able to monetize on that and having that freedom of speech. They have largely not regulated that, and I thank them for that. I don't use their technology today. That's a different issue. They provide a great platform.
We get it. Yeah. So the irony here is we're agreeing that there isn't a whole lot in the law that protects us against companies. So what are we all beating around the bush and getting to? The government needs to step in and regulate.
Right. That's such irony. It's such
that's
irony.
The slippery slope of slippery slopes. Because I mean, literally,
can we all stop and take a drink?
Yeah. I think that's a good opportunity for that.
Yep.
But just as a key point, look, if your provider here calls you tomorrow and they say, look, you must advocate for Dear Leader, whoever Dear Leader is, on your show, on Security Weekly. I want every night, it's going to start with a picture of Dear Leader. It's going to start with everybody saluting Dear Leader and saying what a great job Dear Leader's doing.
And if
you don't do that, we're going to cut you off.
I know where you're.
It's a private. I mean, those private companies could do whatever they want.
I was trying to avoid talking about the articles that I read about China and harvesting organs, right? And then the whole political arena about how we're dealing with China. And basically what I come down to is like, I order all this great technology that allows me to prototype things and do things, and largely it's manufactured in China. And we have this really conundrum, right, about like, I understand many of the issues that surround specifically dealings with China, right? But at the end of the day, there's so much innovation and products that come to market that
and it's a cheaper or more affordable.
Absolutely, Jeff. The barrier to entry is so low, if I'm an innovative, motivated person that has an idea that involves hardware, I can get it manufactured in China and bring it to market at a lower cost. And I just, it's such a tough issue. I read about the things that happen in China. The most recent thing is the harvesting of organs for people who practice like what I've read. Again, I'm not the expert on this, but the brief things that I've read, a very peaceful Buddhist-inspired religion that the Chinese government has deemed an enemy of the state, and they're like harvesting their organs. But yet on the flip side, we're enabling so much innovation and for people of all backgrounds to be able to come to market with their ideas and put things like IR transmitters and receivers in my hands for $7, right? Like that's, speaking of STEM, right? I think that's also fueling that as well. Huge issues. They're not necessarily security related. Therefore, let's move on to
we don't have
what a
answers.
segue.
Let's talk about something we can.
That's called the shut up, Doug segue,
right? So then we're going to talk about another. This is a political issue, I think, within our own circle of security professionals. There was an article from this comes from somewhere. Computer World is the one that published it. That says, ask the question. Does applying patches as soon as they come out really help improve your security today?
No.
Now, it's quoted in the article, and I tell you what, I took a little bit of offense to the comment, right? Because they used the kind of air quotes security expert, like we don't understand business processes, which is, okay, not everyone. I get it. In the generalization, it's a generalization, but I think brings up a point that we should discuss. He says, with a few notable exceptions, in the real world, the risk of getting clobbered by a bad patch far, far outweigh the risk of getting hit with a just patched exploit. Many security, air quotes, experts huff and puff at this assertion. The poobahs preach automatic update for the unwashed masses while frequently exempting themselves from the edict. That's some pretty strong language.
Yeah.
I can't say that I wasn't a little bit offended by that, and I know everyone's offended about everything today, but I read that and I'm like, again, I think there's a lot of generalizations in there. However, if we peel back those layers, which I understand, it's an expression, it's meant to invoke an emotional response, mission accomplished. However, when you sit back and think about that, put your offended side, feelings aside, I'm like, you know what? He's kind of right. I mean, look at the conversation we had with Bryson about how attackers are using available technology. They're using command and control channels that look seemingly normal and able to accomplish their goals. Is patching really that big of a deal today when it comes to your security architecture?
And I immediately jump into prod dev. And so the old world, mainframe world of dev gets approved and gets pushed into production. And I'm kind of with these guys. I'm like the unwashed masses, meaning the people that don't analyze, don't make a determination, don't assess, don't test patches. Probably they should be on automatic updates. And I mean, if your great Aunt Sylvia, turn them on automatic updates. But as a corporate entity, you need to assess these patches, determine how they affect you, and make decisions. But you got to do that within reason. You got to triage it. So you have to look at these patches and go, is this urgent? You have to triage it. You have to decide, how bad is this? Is it something that's going to result in us getting completely compromised? Is it something that's going to, maybe out there on the horizon somewhere there's a threat? Or, it's just every...
But I think a lot of the subtleties that are missed in this article are like when you look at an organization as an attacker and like what's the magic time for which you should have applied a patch? And if you're in an organization and, 30 days after some major Microsoft vulnerability was released, you're not patched, is that okay? Or as an attacker, when you're looking at the network and you're like, there's still MSO 8067 on there. Therefore, I'm going to conclude as an attacker that security is completely lax in this organization. I don't need to do anything fancy. I can own this entire organization without too much trouble, right? Like there's a line so translate that to the defender. Where's the line? And that's a subtlety that this article, in my opinion, has missed. I don't disagree with the statement. I agree. Most organizations can probably wait some period of time before they apply certain patches, pretty much regardless of criticality. However, where is that line in the sand for you as an organization?
Threat, though? I mean, you got to triage it. You got to triage it.
It's not a threat. It's not a threat.
It's more of a. We're talking about vulnerabilities, Doug, not necessarily.
Well,
threats.
but I mean, it is an issue of vulnerabilities and threats, and
you could derive threat from vulnerability.
You've got to triage it and decide.
And Jeff, I know this is an issue near to your heart. As an attacker, if I see a 5-plus-year-old vulnerability in your environment, I'm going to assume that your security posture is very, very low, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's an issue for that organization.
But if you don't even have the thing, I mean, you may have things that you don't even run this service.
If you don't have the thing, you don't have to worry about applying the patch.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. That's what triage is. Triage is looking at the patch and saying, does it affect us? Is it a threat? Is it a vulnerability?
Right.
And where is the impact? And is there no impact? Then maybe we don't need to do it. But if it is an impact,
I'd say something.
Lee and then
Lee first.
Yeah,
Lee
then
first.
Jeff. Yeah.
Okay, so extending what Doug was saying a little bit, I think most organizations have a number of systems in them that are just effectively commodity desktops, and it's actually a large percentage of machines, and you can click automatic patch, although you should have some regression testing. You shouldn't day zero do it. But you want to save your efforts to the development production model that Doug, there's a much greater impact if you wipe out your payroll system than if you take down just a generic word processing system.
Now, Lee,
modulo the CEO and his admin. That's
Lee,
a higher impact.
You are highlighting another subtlety that this article, in my opinion, missed, and that is to classify your systems and data and prioritize accordingly, because it's not just one priority level for all.
Yes.
And I think Doug was saying some of that
point.
too.
Great point. Jeff?
Yeah.
So I think we are making a couple assumptions that, unfortunately, in my experience with customers, doesn't always hold true, and I think that partially complicates things. I mean, Paul, you talked about, as a defender, you're assuming that the company has a defender.
That's true. It's a good point. No, that's also fair.
There are far too many companies out there that are dependent on companies, organizations, think the healthcare world, despite some of our recent interviews. The best and only line of defense very often is the Windows patch cycle for a very Windows heavy environment. I'm curious I got lots of other thoughts, but one question is, does anyone see a difference between, because we're talking mostly the Windows patch cycle, do you see a difference in the urgency to install patches if we're talking simply the desktop environment versus whatever servers might be in an organization?
There's just so many variables that play into that, Jeff.
That's why I'm asking the question.
It's a great point, because it could be that if you deploy this patch to all of your desktops, you disrupt business operations.
Yeah,
certainly plausible. The same thing could be for your servers, right? And the opposite could be true. It could be, desktops are pretty resilient. It could be servers. It depends on your environment, right? I think.
Right. And so somebody in the organization needs to know, as you were saying just a minute ago, in terms of classifying systems and what's more critical or not, somebody needs to be able to make that determination.
Yeah.
You got to have a triage plan.
One organization, it might be the servers. The next organization, let's say it's a hospital, healthcare center where everybody's walking around with tablets that are Windows based, and that's their bread and butter. That's more urgent maybe than whatever servers.
And I love this, Jeff, because it provokes thoughts of, if you're a systems administrator, not even a security person, like you're saying, Jeff, like someone needs to make the decision in the organization. Will this patch or update hurt us more than help us?
Yes.
Right? And that's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not.
It's
not.
And many of us listening, right? All of us listening are going, yeah, I've had to make those decisions before. Even on my own desktop, do I update this application to get that new functionality to fix that security issue, or is it going to break my workflow, right? Everyone has had to make that decision, and it's never an easy one.
Yep.
And whether it's real or perceived, what's certainly popular in terms of reporting in the media these days is malware incidents.
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, the patches that we're talking about are designed to, patch the holes that lead to the, malware, or could lead to malware attacks.
I think, I think there's a small number of organizations that run software or write software that is truly resilient, right? That the patch level doesn't matter.
Small number.
My application, it's a small number, and that's what makes that decision so hard.
But I mean, I used to ask programmers to give me like an assessment of the likelihood something would crash. I mean, this is long ago.
If they're doing good unit testing, Doug,
they're doing good unit testing. But this is in the days before we had to deal with the internet. But I mean, I was asking programmers, what's the likelihood this piece of code that you just wrote is going to crash? But is it 50%, 70%? 20%?
But if they're in a modern development environment, which is a minority, it's a minority in terms of overall technology, you can answer that question much better, because you can go, look, I'm going to apply that patch. I'm going to go run the app. I'm going to go run all of my, not just unit tests, but QA tests and security tests. And I'm going to get back a score. And I'm going to tell you, like, basically how much stuff is failing. And that's going to answer your question about roughly how much work it's going to be to adjust our software to accommodate that.
And that's your triaging that goes into your business model, and you say
still a small number of people, Doug, that can do that level of testing.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's like most people are going, go, activate,
So let me throw a wrench into the discussion, I have my drink ready.
Okay.
For many organizations,
please say PCI. Please say PCI.
That are required to follow PCI.
Yay!
PCI says you must install critical security patches within 30 days of release. Go.
So in reading this article, I really think that that's what they're recommending, and I really do agree. I really think, and my view on this has changed, largely because I think there's a lot more technology available, and largely because I think that malware authors are relying on older exploits are typically the cause of breaches. And there are exceptions to this, but if you're patching everything with 30 days, like, you're probably mitigating much of the risk today. I got to be honest. I think once you get beyond 30 days, and this isn't a hard and fast rule, right? Once you get beyond 30 days, you're in some trouble.
But the problem is people take forever to do this.
They
look
take
at
years,
a patch.
right.
They look at a patch and they go, "Oh yeah, we'll evaluate this," and then it strings out, and all of a sudden, 6 months later, somebody's still saying we're waiting to look at if this will impact any critical systems on the company, and they're still waiting, and they're still waiting, and they're still waiting, and they haven't patched, and all of a sudden they get popped, and that's what bothers me, because it's like they don't have a good practice.
And I totally get it. Like, my perspective on this has changed largely because I'm responsible for software. And when you look at, like, we need to make the transition from Python 2.7 to Python 3, and to model that and look at it, it's a lot of work. You have to balance that with business requirements, with other security requirements, right? And with all kinds of other things. And that's a really hard decision.
It is.
Not just in software.
Paul, you ignorant slut. It's all about making the app, making the service, making the company work. And are we able to meet performance metrics and make money?
It's true.
I don't know all that other stuff you're talking about. That's
functionality is king. Is that a lighter?
It's a lighter.
That's a lighter. It's my lighter for this PCI.
It's a PCI lighter.
You can't see this, but it's there.
So I was going to say that getting to the point where you can identify what has what kind of risks when touched. Takes time. I mean, I think we started working on categorizing systems and what kind of patches and getting from you'll patch this never to a monthly cadence on desktops and a little faster on servers, and some businesses a little longer. But that took about, I don't know, they're still working on it after
40
12
years.
I mean, we got a lot of progress in the first couple of years, but there's still outliers and there's still cleanup. You just don't stop. You have to have some accountability and follow up. You can't just let it go forever. You have to have something watching the guy who's supposed to be evaluating the patch, who's getting it on the 12th of never. That's going to be a problem.
I want to throw this monkey wrench out there, Lee, based on what you said. Like, if you've got to make this evaluation and this decision about should I retrofit my environment or my application for this patch, or should I put that on hold and implement these other security measures that will have a positive security impact? That's a very difficult decision.
Yeah.
Relate that back to my own, I'm looking at my own application. Should I devote resources to going from Python 2.7 to Python 3, or should I prioritize implementing a vault to protect my credentials, right? That's a very difficult question to answer when there's so many unknowns, right?
Yeah. Let me counter with another wrench. Why did Microsoft just put out a patch for Windows 2000?
Again, Jeff, I think the evaluation of risk has so many factors. It's very difficult to determine, do we apply the patch? Do we do the other security projects? Do we implement functionality? There's this constant juggling act that needs to happen.
It's a crazy
Whether
decision.
It's infrastructure, code, whatever it is, it's a juggling act.
It was a crazy decision. I mean, in 1986, it was a crazy decision because it was like, and it was so limited. You know, it was like, am I going to deploy this or not? Even then, it was crazy. Today, it's like, I've got a huge organization. I've got Windows 2000. I've got Windows XP. I've got all these different things, and I'm going to deploy this or not. It's just a deadly difficult decision. But you need a triage plan.
When's a DevOps or SecDevOps expert when we need them? Because what would they be saying right now?
It's interesting. Not everyone's there, though.
They're not.
I think we overstate. I really identify with the security benefits when you do DevOps, DevSecOps correctly. Totally get it. I've personally experienced the benefits of doing that, right? But not everyone's there. Like,
and I mean, the assumption we seem to make here all the time is that people actually have people who know what any of this even means. So often,
Exactly.
I get calls from people who call me and go, "What's the difference in Windows 2000 and Windows 2003?" You know, and you're like, "Do you not have anybody on staff who could actually make that decision?" And they're like, "No, a guy named Chet or something set this up back in 2009, and it's been running ever since then. And we're down, and we're not sure exactly what to do right now." And that's like terrifying to me.
At some point,
Well, and I think that's much more the reality.
It is.
in any of the use cases that we so often talk about.
Not everyone's as nerdy and deep in it as we are collectively as hosts and listeners to this show. And they're like, this app has been, I think we were talking about this, Lee, earlier yesterday, right? Like, the app works, everything's great, and now it's 10 years later, and like, guess what? The app is still, you were talking about a C application or something you wrote, right? Like, hey, it's like still running, right? Like,
well, I'm gonna tell you a story. So my story is that in 1999, a company called me, and I wrote a piece of code for that.
I was just graduating college.
Yeah, I know. Well, I wrote a piece of code for that company back in like 1979 that printed.
I was 2.
I know. Well, I don't care. And I was a coder, by God. So there you go. So
now, that explains why I ask you about code and architecture decisions. Really
I was a coder when you were 2 years old,
but that's because I'm smart, and I ask people that have.
Yeah, well, so this guy calls me and he goes, "Is this piece of code Y2K compliant?" And I'm like, "What?" I wrote that when I was like 16, dude. And I'm like, hell no, it's not Y2K compliant. And the guys think, okay, I'm not even totally clear what that even means, but like we need to worry about that, and you're like, oh my God. And that's the real world. I mean, many companies.
But you commented your code, so it was pretty easy to figure out, right, Doug?
No, January. I tell you what, January 1st, 2000,
every comment took a card. Come on,
January 1st, 2000. Largely, everything was okay.
That code wasn't.
But that is true, Paul. But I think to some degree it was a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to some degree there was a lot of work put into solving a lot of the
I agree, Jeff.
issues that were out there. So
but my point was that there's stuff that's out there. There's companies that just don't have any resources.
Why can't we have the Y2K for security? Like, why can't we evangelize something?
You're going to have it
for like 2 years and
You're
have
gonna
everyone
have it.
fix a bunch of stuff.
It's coming up soon. The next Y2K
Oh, yeah,
is
it's coming.
when the Unix clock runs out or something.
Well, but
like
not
that.
even that. The Y2K for security is going to happen, and then it's going to be bad.
But
I don't know what it is yet.
The Y2K for software, though, as Jeff was saying, like largely, I think it was a non-issue because
it was. Yeah,
we evangelized that 2 to 3 years beforehand, and a whole bunch of basically developers. I mean, let's be frank. Developers were like, "Yeah, let's fix our stuff."
I mean, I had a radio show and started in 1997. We were talking about that issue for 2 years.
Yeah.
And people were spending a lot of money to fix that problem, and they fixed it. And then on the morning of January 2000, I was on the radio, and I said,
if you worked in IT or development in 1999 into 2000, you were at work on January 1st, 2000, making sure everything worked.
And I feel
I was.
Yes, I was.
Me too.
Yep.
I feel compelled to say, because it is 2019. To quickly summarize what was the Y2K issue was code that was written in the 20th century, in this probably going back to the 60s, probably more often the 70s, where there was a date involved because computers were relatively slow, memory and storage space was a high-priced commodity back in those days. To save space in code and storage, many developers put dates in and only used 2 digits for the year. So it was 68, it was 72, it was 95. And there was a realization made when 2000 comes and we roll over, there was great concern about what was going to happen to all sorts of code that at that point was running what we would describe today as critical infrastructure, IoT, ICS systems. Basically the entire world was running on code that was written for mainframes with a 2-digit code for the year. So there was massive efforts that were gone through for years up to that point to try to go through all the code that was out there and all the sub-libraries and sub-functions, and everybody tried to track down any place where there might be a date to change the integer variable from 2 digits to 4 digits to accommodate a 4-digit year. So, we know what it was, but I suspect that there might be a few listeners
it's a great
talking
point,
about
Jeff.
Y2K.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
It's an interesting problem related to security, right? If you're writing code today and thinking about, hey, if this code's running 20 years in the future, what conditions do like no one writes code like that, right?
No, but they should.
They should. I agree they should.
But none of us did. I mean, I wrote code in the 70s and I went, when this guy called me, I was like, what? How on earth could this still be being used? And they were like, oh, it works. We print our checks every week by pushing the F10 button just like you told us. And I'm like, oh, my God. But they were, because it costs money to replace that stuff. And then they're going, it works. I push F10 every week on Friday at 4 o'clock and all the checks print.
A lot of people made a lot of money consulting to fix Y2K.
Oh, hells, yes.
Because as you got into the late 90s, even in the late 90s, there were a lot of folks who were not COBOL programmers anymore.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of COBOL programmers, right? And COBOL programmers were making a lot of money because they knew how to program in COBOL.
Well, yeah.
which is, I'm not knocking the language or whatever, but
So
Oh no, it's awful.
is it?
Oh, it's absolutely
I never
horrible.
I never
It's one
coded
of the most
in COBOL,
awful
but, yeah.
languages
I,
ever.
I saw
Blessing.
some, but yeah. I never.
Ugh.
what I'm
But data
talking
division.
about is the next Y2K is that all the Unix clocks started. Unix time starts with January 1st, 1970, and what is it, Doug? It's a 32-bit integer.
I'm afraid so,
Yeah,
Or
Jack.
maybe it might actually be. I don't know what it is, but
It's a
it
32-bit
runs-
integer.
It runs out in 2038.
Yes,
And
it
so
does.
which sounds like a long time in the future.
No,
but
it's really not.
back when I was a kid, 2000 seemed like a long
Yeah.
time in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah,
And
And
that
in 2038, I'll be
So-
going, I told you!
So
Oh, you
maybe
can't.
none of this will be working then, but that's going to be the next big thing, is trying to figure out what happens when all the Unix clocks roll.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the
I'm
end of
kind
the
of
world.
curious. See, that is going to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of 32-bit integers out there that are.
Ooh-wee.
Oh,
There's a lot of
boy.
32-bit integers going to have some bad problems in
Now I'm thinking
2038.
about my own code and like what stores the data, isn't it?
It makes you clench. Ugh.
And just for giggles, in the early days, a lot of people used the Unix system clock to randomize their pseudo random password generators.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's like the
for a
Exorcist
field day.
on that.
Oh, we were talking about programmers, and we made some comment. In any case, there's a backdoor in your living room was the title of the article, and essentially it was talking about Samsung TVs having all these heinous vulnerabilities. Now, the article goes into way more details and actually is an awesome article.
It is.
And I was telling our developer, Jack, who started yesterday, who's been awesome, and went through a very rigorous interview process because no one believed that a 15-year-old had the coding skills that this person had, and Jack does. And now that he's been here for 2 days, it's totally true. And so when I read this article, I'm highly offended. Again, I'm highly offended, and I'm not often offended by stuff. Like, ask people that know me, I'm not easily offended by anything. But this article highly offended me because they were talking about how the code on TVs is bad. In Samsung, or in other TVs, I think, or may just be Samsung TVs, run Tizen OS. And a Mihai Niederman recently was quoted stating, "It may be the worst code I've ever seen. Everything you can do wrong there, they do it. You can see that nobody with any understanding of security looked at this code or wrote it. It's like taking an undergraduate and letting him program your software." Now, I take two issues with that. One, he used him. It could be him or her that wrote the code. Like, that's just awful to say him.
But
Secondly,
face it, it's more likely him.
statistics
And
are proven
I'll leave it there.
more likely him. And again,
It's written bad code. is
I
what
want to
I'm
see
saying.
all people write good software. Okay,
Yes.
first of all.
Right.
Secondly, he says an undergraduate. And my comment is, our latest developer is 15, and he's a he. He writes better code than many other programmers that I've seen and has an understanding of code architecture and software design like I've never seen before. And Jack is an anomaly, but I think to say that letting an undergraduate is awful. I mean, was it Lee that stated you started programming when you were in high school? Doug, you said when did you start programming? High school. I started when I was 7, only because my parents signed me up for a programming class, and I was just lucky that my parents did that for me. Just really seriously lucky, right? And I'm not saying I wrote great code, but to state that age and or gender is a determining factor as to the quality of code you write is an atrocity. And you should be shamed for saying what you said.
I don't agree with
just to
that. Yeah,
be,
you're
just
right.
To be
I don't
quite
agree
honest,
with
just
that.
to be quite honest, because I've seen people that have a lot of coding or claim to have a lot of coding experience that are maybe much older or of any gender, race, or religion, and I'm like,
I've had undergraduate students who could code circles around me and make me look like a fool. And so I'm definitely going to say you're right. That's a very poor statement.
Age,
I have a silly
gender,
question.
race, or religion has nothing to do with the quality of code that you can write.
I agree.
And that's something that we all need to be cognizant of, especially in cybersecurity, as we're trying to hire people and put qualifications and requirements around who we're going to hire.
Yeah,
like the
lame.
programmer that we found just happens to not be
Look
old
at
enough.
look at their code. Come on.
Like Jack happens to not be old enough to have a driver's
well,
license.
you
so
know
we
what?
we have
the person
Come on.
give you their code and then make an
But
But
assessment.
by the time he's old enough, he's going to be in a self-driving car, so it doesn't really matter.
right.
Right.
You could
Out of
probably write-
curiosity, polling our illustrious crew here, when was the last time you wrote code that had to be compiled?
Yesterday.
A while.
I'm
For me, a
C
while.
programmer. Leave me alone.
Yeah, but when's the last time you wrote a C program?
But
Yesterday. Leave me alone.
I love it.
Oh, that's because you hadn't had the interview yet and learned that you're wasting your time. Gotcha.
I love compiled languages largely because that's one of the languages I learned early on.
It's but
So-
I mean,
So-
but I love
nothing wrong.
I love
Stupid
Python too.
question.
Don't get me wrong.
How do you know when you're what do you collectively call all the stuff we have to? Is it called scripting languages? What do we call it? Frameworks?
Interpretive language.
Interpreted,
Interpreted
like
languages.
Python is an
When you're
interpreted
writing
language.
code in interpretive languages and you're not compiling it, how do you know if it works or not?
Does it work?
If it throws an error or not. I mean,
Does your porn come up or not?
to Jeff's point, it is different that, and what I miss in working with interpreted languages is that step, right? There's I review the code, I think it's going to work. There's a step of does it compile or not, and then you got to get it to compile, and then once it compiles, does it run? With interpreted languages, you kind of skip over that. You skip over that compile step.
No, you skip over it.
You go, does it run? Totally.
But it's really a
valid point.
performance
totally
issue.
missed the whole segmentation fault thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it's a performance issue, and I mean,
is.
really, at the end of the line, there's not any real difference except for the performance issue. Compiled languages are much more efficient, but does that really matter anymore in the modern age?
The skill level of the developer matters. The Python code that I've looked at, if they had to write that in C, to Jeff's point, it might have not compiled. If it did, it might have core dumped, and it might have been an atrocity, right?
So
there is
and maybe
differences.
this is a curmudgeon-y moment, and I'm not extolling the virtues of compiled code or not, because I had to write a program back when I was at the DoD. We were converting from a proprietary operating system and programming language over to a commercial version, which was primarily Unix and C. And I wrote code that compiled, and the program ran. And once, and when I was running it through small samples of data. Let's say it did stuff with data.
Totally fine, right?
It worked, but when I threw large volumes of data, which is kind of what we did, I discovered that there was logic errors that caused it to not crash, but pretty much hang up.
But those exist in all kinds of code.
So my question philosophically is, and I don't mean to be flip, but maybe I am coming across as flip. Are today's developers undisciplined and lazy because they don't have to go through more regimented steps like we used to do in the past?
I think that undisciplined and lazy are two different things. I am a huge proponent of, if you're going to be an engineer that does software or IT, I strongly recommend that you gain some experience in a couple of different things before you start picking up all the newfangled interfaces and languages, right? You should write code in an editor that does nothing for you to check syntax. You should write your code, and you laugh, but
that's hard, guys.
You should write your code to gain that experience, right? I think you should write code that is both compiled and interpreted to gain that experience. I'm not saying you got to spend years doing it, right? I think you should gain some experience doing that. I think in the end, I also think you should read Code Complete from Microsoft Press, work with senior developers to learn the right way to structure code, comment code. All of those things are going to contribute to you being a much better developer. I think it's all about experiences.
Yes.
And again, I think we're lucky, us older folks that are here on the show, right, that have coded in all of these older languages, older editors, compiled plus interpreted. I think developers that are coming up now should do that. They don't have to spend years like we did. Like I spent years writing in editors, and you guys have too, right? Like, but I think everyone should have those similar experiences, Jeff. I think that should be taught in school. When you learn, you should write code in Notepad, right? In VI, like something that does nothing.
VI.
Well, yeah, that's
Rest of your whips.
And when you're in school, you're going to use Windows and Notepad, and and you should use VI, like whatever. In an editor that doesn't do any code checking, you should compile your code. You should have those experiences because in the end, it's going to make you a better software engineer. And whether that's your path or not, whether you're a security professional, sysadmin that maybe writes a little bit of code, that's a very, very valuable experience.
Efficiency is important, even if it doesn't matter.
I agree.
And that's why.
But that's back to Jeff's point.
It is
when big data was, large amounts of data were thrown at my code, like it crashed. Like you need to have those.
That's exactly. That's why Jeff and I get along all the time because we like cigars and bourbon, but we also understand that efficiency matters.
It does.
Yep. But there's some fundamentals in coding that haven't changed. I mean, interpreted or compiled languages, it still needs to be efficient. The algorithms need to work. You've got to handle your variables properly. The code has to have no segments that don't get executed. Those things won't change. Punctuation, spelling, those things all matter.
And Lee, the thing that grinds my gears, right, that I talked about in Enterprise Security Weekly was spelling mistakes in the code. I don't care if that's in your code. I don't care if that's in your variables. I don't care if that's in your comments. Those details matter. If you can't write code that doesn't have spelling mistakes, you're at a significant disadvantage.
But I'm going to strip that out and say that I can actually define a type that lets me misspell stuff all day long, but it's the efficiency that really matters. I mean, if your code is not efficient and effective, it doesn't matter that you can't spell. You can write you can type def a class.
It may not matter today, but I think ultimately it matters.
Well, I agree, Jeff, because at some point,
because I think it's a discipline.
The awesome programmers that I worked with when I was still in college, right? When I was still in high school, when I was 7 years old learning coding, really taught me that like all of those little things,
they do matter. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying that that's all part of efficiency. And if you write efficient code.
But they also taught me that, and I was just lucky to be working with folks that taught me this, that other people might have to look at your code. Right?
Amen, brother.
The torments of the damned.
And also they
So I've been holding off asking, is interpreted code commented?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh.
Are developers just as bad as commenting today?
So here's another thing I talked about in Enterprise Security Weekly. The other thing they taught me is that I might have to go back and review my own code and that you're going to forget how it worked. In fact, I talked about Jack, our developer, right? I was showing Jack a sample project that I did, and I'm like, I don't remember why I wrote this, like, let alone interpreting the comments or the code. I'm like, what was that? What was that project?
This is something.
I'm old now and I forget. But here's the thing: if you don't comment your code, but the point I made on Enterprise Security Weekly, if you don't comment your code, and putting this in a security context on this show, a lot of the code we write is going to be code that does automation in the cloud, that does a lot of the things we do in security today, but doesn't in code. Whether it's a script, whether it's JSON or an XML file you're defining to run your Ansible or Salsa or whatever it is, right? You're going to have to write good comments. Writing good comments is an art form in and of itself. It was only through developers I worked with that looked at not just my code, but my comments and told me, Joseph Betancourt, to this day, I thank Joseph for teaching me how to not just code, but write good comments.
Yeah.
Right? And that's important, not just for the people who inherit your code, but for the code that you write moving forward.
Well, listen, on forensics, we always teach people in forensics, you're gonna put something together. You're gonna do all this elaborate stuff, and you're gonna find these cool things. 7 years from now, you're gonna get a call on your phone. I have there's probably a video lecture you could find of me saying this. 7 years from now, you're gonna get a call, and somebody's gonna say, "Hi, Doug. We're going actually to trial tomorrow, or in 2 weeks, or 4 days, or whatever. I need you to testify on Monday, and I know it's Thursday night, but on Monday we're going to a hearing, and I need you to come in." And you're going, "This is something I looked at 7 years ago," and you got to be able to jump into that. What you did, you got to have that documentation. You got to be able to sit down with that and say.
And I don't want to pick on education, Doug, but I didn't learn how to write documentation in school. I learned how to write documentation from my coworkers in my career.
Well, you didn't take my programming class.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. No, I
really didn't take my programming class, because I never stop harping on people about that, because I'm like, look, you're going to write
comments or documentation.
You're going to write a piece of code, and 8 years from now, somebody's going to call you, and they're going to go, "Is this Y2K compliant?" And you're going to go, "Oh."
Documentation.
I mean, because you need to be able to go look at your code. If nobody else's code, you got to look at your code and say, "I know what the hell this is doing and how I got it to work 12, 15, whenever the hell it was." You got to be able to go back and look at that and say, "I know how to make this work, and I know what I did."
Like, even a couple of months later, that might as well be someone else's code.
Well, a couple of days later for me now, it's like, what the hell is this?
It's so true.
So the thing about comments is it's cultural. It's what you grew up with. My first exposure to comments was for the timeshare basic. We got the source code, which was assembler. And there was looking at the modules that we wanted to change, and they were great at comments, although one of the developers was into soft porn, which made them exciting comments. But then later, as I started getting code pieces and things I wanted to do, the value of the comments that described what the heck it was I had were huge, and that stuck with me. Am I as good at writing comments as I should be? No, but I sure appreciate the hell out of them.
You know what, though? I also love funny comments, and I love that Jack, our new developer, was going through all the code, and he's like, "Dude, I've been like laughing all day, basically just like reading your comments." He's like, "The amount of swear words and like funny stuff in your comments, I actually think there's some merit to that, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone who's written software has more than likely put in a comment that's like, "I have no idea what this code does," right? Like, but that's a valid comment. That's a perfectly valid comment. It is.
I always remember one from mine was
back in the day they wrote the code. You're more likely pulling code from other sources. So
there
back
is
in the day, yes.
But Jeff, that's a great point. I think that people who are learning software today have the advantage of having the internet to pull code samples from. If you were coding before Stack Overflow, right? I think that's very different, right? You were relying on looking at other people's code that you worked with, which is a very small sample, right? That you could pull code from, and that's a very short.
Well,
there was a transition from pre-internet to post-internet code, Jeff. Certainly.
Yep. But look, folks, if you put a comment in your code that just says, "I don't know what the hell this does, but it works," at least you put a comment there.
And that's a valid comment. I agree with you, Doug. That is a valid comment, because when another developer looks at that, you understand that the person that wrote this code didn't quite understand what this did, and that's valuable information, in my opinion.
No,
really
absolutely.
Is.
And I remember
Yep.
telling a student, I had a student at game when I used to teach game programming. I had a student. I said she pulled into a bunch of code, and I was like, "I don't even know what the hell this does." And she was like, "I know. I found it on this like site."
Yep.
And I'm like, "Then just write a comment that says, 'I don't know what the hell this does, but it works and it generates the image I wanted.'"
Sure.
At least then, when you go back 12
Valid,
years from
yes.
now and you look at it, you'll go, "I didn't know what it did then. I don't know what it does now, but I better figure it out." And I mean, I think it's so critical that you document these things in your code. If you don't, you're gonna pay later. They'll always be deposing. I tell people all the time, ABD, always be deposing. So when you're sitting in that deposition and they're saying, "Did you know what this did?" And you can go, "Well, the comment right there says no, I didn't."
Right.
I mean, at least you know that you didn't know what the hell it did. You just stuck it in there. And I think that's really, and we do that all the time. We all do it. We go find a code snippet, we stick it in there and go, "That works."
I think that just to summarize, documentation or comments, the way you learn, at least for me, the way I learned what the difference between a poor comment was and a good comment was a senior developer looking at that and coaching you through, that's a bad comment. And to make it better, you need to describe it this way. It's kind of, it's a very difficult thing to articulate. There's a very sharp contrast between.
I used to tell people, you have a chance to talk to your future self.
Yeah.
And this is your chance.
I love that.
Put it there and talk to your future self and tell yourself, because one day
So when we get to 2038, we know.
Hell yeah. You go, hey, man, if it's 2038, you're screwed. Put that in your comments.
And if you want to understand how that works, watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
It's a great point, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yep. Great point. Other stories you want to cover?
Nah.
But we have other stories.
Nah.
I know we've been like really talking about
This
code.
has been the philosophical programming episode.
I love it.
So actually, there was one. It's a really lightweight story. It's my last one, and it was about a Pennsylvania trucking company that got ransomware. And what was cool about it is they went totally transparent. They put on their website, we got blown away. These things are offline, and the next day these things are back online, but these are off. And our customer service deck is online. They got pen and paper. They will take your orders. I mean, so many people, you hear it, ransomware is the end of the world. They have no idea how to pick themselves up and keep operating and communicating with their customers. I just thought it was really clever. And this is not a big company. It's a little guy.
But, Lee, what's interesting is, for one, I really suck at math. Like I stated before, I started using a computer and programming when I was 7. I think, take for that what you will, I think that really kind of made me suck at math, because I'm like, why do I need to be good at math? Because computers can do that for me, right? Like really, like I do it. I struggle like helping my kids with their math homework. I'm like,
case in point, you were actually 11.
Yeah, no, I was 7, but the thing is, when I look at my children's math homework, I'm like, I could write a program that could like fill in all the answers for your math homework, but like in my head, like doing the math, I'm like on my phone using the calculator. It's awful. I agree, it's awful, but I think it speaks to people's mindsets and their aptitude towards solving problems, right? And so, and so we're getting the cash register.
I agree,
thing. If cash,
but it's also
speaking
why
of
some of
PCI,
us,
Jeff, right? Like if cash registers go down, people like myself that are like, I don't know, I could tell the computer how to do the math, but like I can't do the math myself. They're going to struggle when the computer goes down and they have to do the math themselves, right? Like it's a conscious effort for me to learn the math and do it. But that's a huge issue. What if in today's day and age, the computers go down and everyone's forced to go to the old everyone who's a host here on the show
Get out your
remembers the old cash registers, right, where you had to like punch in all the, like my grandfather had one in the barber shop, had an older
I don't appreciate
one in his
that
basement,
grandfather reference.
like awesome, like cool cash register, right? That like did the chunking thing and the yeah, right. But like we'd have to do that in our heads when the iPad that's running our point of sale system goes down.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of a pet peeve, curmudgeon-y thing, because my family was in retail when I was a kid, and I was trained to, when somebody, when you have a sale and somebody gives you money, you count back the change up to the amount of the currency that they gave them. So, if the bill was $13.50 and they give you a 20, you give them back. Okay, here's 50 cents. So $13.75,
Right,
14. Here's $1.15. Here's $5.20.
That's a lost
Now,
art today, Jeff.
Some of it,
and
it's been a lost art for years because, I'll go in and I'm an old timer, so I use. I'm getting to that point where I rummage in my pocket for my change. I want to use it up. I'm the guy that everybody hates, slowing everybody down. But give somebody.
Jeff, you're the person that gives them more than what the sale cost is,
God.
right?
2015.
Yes, I'm the person that gives them.
I'm going to give you $20.20.
I give them 21 1/4.
Oh God!
Because I want to round up to something.
Yeah.
I'm
you'll
guy.
get a $5 bill back.
Oh my God!
But how many? And maybe you've only witnessed it because you're not that guy. But how many? Clerks, they just kind of stare at the money you've just given them, and they're like, "I don't know what to do." And I tell them, just type in the amount.
Right. Yes. Let the computer do the math.
Let the computer do the math.
It's like a B-sod of humans. I did that to somebody recently. I handed them some bills and some coins, and I'm like, there you go, with that $5 back, and they're just like,
It's like exception, core dump.
Yeah.
Try
catch exception. Yeah. Oh my God!
It's equally as common to have the clerk say, "Well, you've given me too much. I don't need this. You've given me too much." And I'm like, "No, just type in the amount. Trust me."
Then you got to do the truck driver trick and go, "No, I gave you 4 20s. You owe me 6 20s back."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the person go, "What?" They're like, "I gave you 4 20s and 100, and you need to give me 6 20s and 200s back." And they're Yeah, that's the modern age.
My pet peeve has been, the computer says 650, so they're like 5, 6, 50. I'm like, that's not how you do it. Do it. It's a dime.
I did 5 years in retail too. I completely relate to
Yep.
Jeff.
That's because we're all old.
Yeah,
well,
I did one. I did even worse trick. My boss and I were left-handed, so we put the change in and the cash in the drawer the other way, which was fine. It was just us. Started getting right-handed code. It was a pain in the ass.
I had one of those.
You guys count backwards.
Yeah, I had one of those. I worked at a truck stop, and there was a left-handed clerk on the evening shift. It was bad. Yeah, I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Did you have pickled eggs at the
We
truck
did
stop?
have pickled eggs, and we had pickled pig's feet too. And you could stick your whole greasy arm that you had been impregnating sheep with earlier down in the bucket and pull out a pickled egg.
Well, you were in Tennessee, so that's probably a reality.
Yeah, it was great. It was
that
yummy.
is a tangent that is way out of control.
Should really close the show.
Tell you, how do we top that? Hey, have you tightened up your Venmo?
I win.
Yet? He says, changing the subject.
There's articles that actually talk about security in the show notes.
There are.
We chose not to talk about them because this was way more interesting for us to talk
We've had
about.
so much fun.
Oh, we had a lot of fun here.
This is so much fun.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part of the week.
We're ending the show again. Wiki.securityweekly.com. There are actually security.
There's actually
articles.
relevant articles on the wiki.
We've just kind of been talking during this segment, which is what it's all. It's what it's all about.
That's why you're watching.
But our listeners generally tell us these are their favorite episodes. So
I had a lot of fun. Hopefully, our
unapologetic.
listeners were entertained and informed in the segment, even if we didn't cover all of the stories. But you can go read those on your own.
Yeah,
we talked about the ones
about penis doodles.
Penis doodles.
What we were passionate about. I feel like we talked about in this
Hells
episode.
yes.
Lee,
absolutely.
Johnny wants you to take us out. So Lee, I'm going to Lee.
Okay, thank you so much. Over and out.